Are there some books that should be in the Bible that somehow are not? I think no. What do you think?
I think no. I think all the books that were intended to be a part of Holy Scripture that God intended are there.
We have 66 books in the Bible. Now, there are some books that some want to say should be in the Bible. In some Bibles, in Catholic Bibles, you find the books of the Apocrypha.
I believe that if God had intended them to be essential for us, they would be there.
But no, I don't think you need to fear there's any book that should be in the Bible that somehow escaped. If it was meant to be there, as you said, Wes, God would see to it.
That's right.
What happened, though, is that around 1827, the British and Foreign Bible Society had a controversy, what they called the Apocrypha controversy. The conservative side started saying, well, why are we even wasting print money on the Apocrypha in the middle of these Bibles to send for missionary efforts if we don't even think they're canon? So starting from then on, all new Bibles being printed by them no longer had the Apocrypha, and it was primarily framed as a monetary decision.
Well, what happened was, it was originally published in the King James Bible. The original King James had the Apocrypha in the 1800s. They found out that it was obviously cheaper to print a Bible. If you didn't have that many pages, you could take that section out. And so our people, a generation and more, came to think that it was totally normal to have a Bible that didn't have the Apocrypha in it, in a way that earlier generations of Lutherans, even Lutherans here in the United States, would not have been able to conceive. They always thought of that as just those books were right there in the center of the Bible.
View of Scripture, right? This should not threaten it, because our idea of, oh no, this is so shocking, is a product of people making monetary decisions. So like that's the first step. It's like, oh, okay, so like this is a man-made situation, right? It's similar to in the Bible when in Kings it talks about how the book of the law, probably Deuteronomy, if not potentially more than Deuteronomy, went missing. And Josiah, they found it suddenly during King Josiah's day, went to the prophetess Huldah, and Josiah and the priests are like, oh my goodness, like this book was never enforced. We haven't had a Passover or a festival as it outlined since the days of Joshua.
According to the story in 2 Kings, during temple repairs that were being done in the time of King Josiah, the scroll of the Torah, that's how it's phrased, the scroll of the Torah was found. And when it was read, the king was distressed because its requirements were not being upheld. Now this term, the scroll of the Torah, as I said, does not occur in Genesis through Number. It is a phrase that occurs in Deuteronomy. Josiah is said to take action. He assembles the people, he publicly reads this scroll, he destroys all of the high places. It's Deuteronomy that contains the prohibitions of high places and so on. After these reforms, it's reported that the Passover was celebrated. It was celebrated not as a family observance in individual homes. It was celebrated as a national pilgrimage festival celebrated by everyone in Jerusalem. That's how its celebration is described in the book of Deuteronomy. So again, this is another basis for the conclusion that the scroll of the law found by Josiah and guiding his reforms was something like the legal core of Deuteronomy.
Right? That's like presuming that this book has been missing not just like a couple hundred years, as though like it came under a bad king of Israel, but like, oh, somehow during Joshua's period, this all went missing. Oh, good, we found it. Like, okay, but like that's not God made that thing missing. It's that God allowed the possibility that a book could go missing because of humans mishandling it or purposefully hiding it or any of those other scenarios. But that also means that like the idea of scriptures going out and coming in is a biblical phenomenon, right? And if you read in the Bible as well, like in Chronicles and in Joshua itself and other places, there's constant references made. Is it not written in such and such a book? Is it not written in such and such a book?
I think all the books that were intended to be a part of Holy Scripture that God intended are there. There are other books mentioned. There's the book of Enoch. There's the book of, I think, a book of Elijah, and there's others that are kind of mentioned. But I believe that if God had intended them to be essential for us, they would be there.
The way these documents are referenced demonstrates that they are considered authoritative. They are considered as authoritative as the book itself that is being written. So the fact that it goes missing, or a prophecy of Ahijah or something goes missing, probably says less to do with God, just like the Deuteronomy going missing says something about God, as much as it says about humans and their inability to answer the divine call of preserving or hearing or responding to the word. In terms of thinking through the diversity of our canon situation, where there are so many different Christians with different Bibles and canons, this isn't different. In Jesus' day, the Jews were divided on the canon. To this day, there are two canons in Judaism. Most people don't realize this. There are Beta Israelite Jews in Ethiopia, and the book of Enoch and Tobit and others are scripture to them. They're part of their Tanakh.
It was written entirely in Ge'ez, freely mixed and matched Hebrew and Greek translations, had an 8-book compendium of law called the Orit instead of a 5-book Torah, and contained no fewer than 14 extra books, 6 of which are exclusively canon to the Beta Yisrael, and one of which, the Vision of Ezra, is known to be Christian in origin.
Then you've got Rabbinic Judaism, and they don't have those scriptures, right? And yes, the Beta Israelite Jews were influenced by the Ethiopian Orthodox Christians in the area. Nonetheless, they have their own canon. So there are 2 Jewish groups today still who have different visions of the canon, just as there are Christians. But in Jesus' day, the Essenes had different books like Enoch that they were reading. You had Pharisees who were, on the edges with sometimes certain books, other things that they're looking at. Ben Sira could be scripture. The Talmud, even Rabbinic Judaism, was debating some of these books. There were different sages who were confused about whether the book of Sirach was scripture or not scripture. And then even in the Gospels, it tells us, right? The Sadducees only believed in the Torah, only the first 5 books.
Off the bat, you need to know that the Sadducees were much smaller in number than the Pharisees. Unlike the Pharisees, they rejected all of what we call the Old Testament, except for 5 books, the first 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
And interestingly enough, when Jesus went to talk to them, he almost exclusively talked about the first 5 books. And Jesus had this ethic of like, whatever your scriptures are, I'm coming to talk from them, right? He didn't ever wade into, you should believe in the prophet Jeremiah as scripture. He never chastises them that way. It's like, well, okay, what do you believe? That's where we'll work from. We'll just deal with what you've got. So when we start recognizing the diversity of the canon and realizing the situation we live in, and we see that it's actually no different than the early Christians. This is their own experience. It's an artificially created one where we think, oh, there's just this single Bible, no differences, no problems. When we realize that, then if they all throughout Christian history could be fine with their faith in Jesus and none of this was rocking for them, right? Then if we're feeling rocked by this, it's an artificial creation of man that's causing us to feel that way. It's not natural in Christian history that we should feel that tension. So
I just want to give a quick shout out over to Adventist Today and thank them for being the sponsors of this video.